Is BTC the real Bitcoin? Or were we deceived?
Imagine going to the store, grabbing a bag of chips and checking out. When you reach the checkout counter, you tell the clerk, "I would like to pay with this card." The clerk responds and tells you, "Okay, that will be $3.55 for the chips and $125,000 for the card processing fee." Why is it so much? You ask. Well, we want to be more decentralized, so we use small blocks instead of large blocks. If you want a 25 cents processing fee but less decentralization, then you can go next door. I'll have to take a look, you say.
Let's talk about this processing fee. At about the time of this video, in 2024, BSV is consistently 500,000 times cheaper to transact on than BTC. The fees for BTC have been ranging from $2 to $75, and the fees for BSV have been around $0.000001 to $0.000001. This equates to the ratio in our example, 25 cents to $125,000. Now, just for fun, which sounds cheaper to you, transporting an envelope or transporting a shipping container? Obviously, an envelope is cheaper. What if instead I asked which is cheaper? Sending 1 billion individual envelopes all mailed separately or one single shipping container? Remember this for later.
You decide to go over to the other store with the cheaper transaction fee, but with less decentralization. Perhaps there is a catch to this. This decentralization sounded important, even if it costed more. You walk up to the clerk, explain the situation, and ask him what the deal is. He smiles and tells you this.
You're right that our transaction fee is smaller. However, you are concerned about the decentralization. Let me show you how this works. I take your money and the fee when you take the chips. I look at the money, see that it is valid, but I still need to register it since money in the Bitcoin world can be copied as many times as you like until it is officially registered on a receipt. Only the first receipt is accepted in final account balances. So, to be extra sure that you didn't get a receipt from someone else for the money with the same serial numbers, I can check online. However, I can already see that your money at least is valid, even if it has been copied. I contacted a node, and within 1 second, I am already 99.9% sure that your money, which I already validated as real by myself, has also not been used for another receipt. This is because a node responded to me, telling me that it has accepted your receipt as the first one seen. Within seconds, the rest of the nodes in the world have also seen the receipt. Now, let's talk about these nodes. You see, decentralization can mean many things. The other store clerk was not referring to the fact that a node can be removed and the others will fill in its place. He was referring to more separation in the network. He believes that this separation will prevent someone bad controlling the network, but I will show you how the opposite is true. His network will have issues with security, but mine is robust and will not be subject to the same types of attacks. This is because he is confused about a couple things. Let me show you.
The clerk then takes you to the analogy mailbox. A magical network mailman comes by at light speed to pick up the transaction. We are going to follow him and see where he goes. We follow both mailmen from each store. The mailman in the BTC store takes the large fee and the transaction in an envelope to a shipping center. This shipping center is small and has a lot of work to do, with many employees, but they are only shipping small folders. When we follow the BSV mailman, we also go to a shipping center with employees and workers. However, they are doing even less work. Instead of folders, though, they are moving train cars and shipping containers.
The first mistake your BTC friend made has to do with auditing. He believes that you need a small shipping center so that everyone can simply construct their own shipping center to check all the envelopes. However, he is mistaken. Do you see that filing cabinet with old months? That is the blockchain history. He thinks that it needs to be small to make sure the history is correct, but let's take a deeper look. He also knows that each month contains the balance of the previous month at the beginning. In the Bitcoin world, this is not even only a balance, but it is actually a fingerprint of the folder called a hash. This fingerprint will be different if any tiny part of the history is altered, even if the balance itself is the same as without the change. Let's take apart a shipping container to find our transaction. Let's also pick another random transaction in the shipping container to verify it. As you can see, the transaction itself has a fingerprint, then it is placed in a folder which has a fingerprint, and then that folder is placed in yet another folder, which has a fingerprint. Before you know it, it only takes a few folders before we have a fingerprint for the whole world. Just by being an auditor who checks these fingerprint trails, you are acting as what is sometimes called a single payment verifier or simple payment verification node or SPV node in the Bitcoin world. You might be wondering, don't we need to be able to look and find serial numbers? Well, there's two ways this can easily be done. One is by storing the history of the dollar being spent in the transaction and the locations of it with the transaction or with the wallet holding that dollar. The other way is to order and index these folders based on their fingerprints and to index everything, the dollars, and folders, and fingerprints in order using the same tree structure, which is something the nodes can handle. Anything you want to find will take the computer hardly any work at all to find, since we will ever only need to go a few folders deep. It just needs to hold a lot of memory to be able to do this. With your own wallet, you are your own money manager. Let's talk about this at the end. So, we are using the same fingerprint technique that the BTC system is using for checking previous months, except that they forgot that the fingerprint technique also works to check the folders nested inside each other. This means that it doesn't matter how big the shipping center is, as anyone is able to check any transaction they like at any time.
This is known as the block wars debate. But you might be asking, isn't BTC the original ticker symbol for Bitcoin? Why would someone make another one and name it BSV? Doesn't that make it the new version? Let's talk about why not only is BSV the better version, but why it actually is the original version, and that BTC is the changed version. You see, BTC is just a financial ticker symbol. However, let's say that when gold was first discovered, people used it, but fool's gold was also being found and traded with. Now, the name gold could have been assigned to either the real or the false gold once they have been differentiated. When there is a hard fork in Bitcoin, 2 or more new month history are produced, both or all referring to the same previous month fingerprint. However, we have to be careful to determine why the fork occurred and which fork should be considered the correct one. When the core developers for Bitcoin began maintaining limits on the block size, segregating the signatures, and maintaining disabled status for commands, the original design for Bitcoin protocol was put into question. Were they just confused about the potential, or was there something more sinister at play? You see, with small block sizes, the network traffic would have to be done by privately owned and centrally controlled shipping centers, only going to the Bitcoin centers for final fingerprint verification. This means networks like the Lightning Network could have been an attempt to allow a small group of people to essentially control practical access to Bitcoin while disguised as a way to keep it open and decentralized.
Now, let me show you why the BTC structure is actually less secure, even though it has more shipping centers with copies of the same information. They are doing more work, by the way, because there are 20,000 of them competing for a lottery of their folder, while the BSV centers only play a lottery amongst a few dozen. Their work of handling shipping containers instead of envelopes is also more efficient use of cost per transaction, since these containers can easily contain millions of envelopes. In fact, they can keep making containers larger than that to move around billions and trillions of envelopes. To see why the BTC system is less secure, though, we have to zoom out and follow the paths of numerous different transactions. You see, these shipping centers need to communicate with each other efficiently. If they need to send messages to each other from one end of this web to another, the traffic starts getting clogged. There is no quick way to verify which traffic is actually just spamming their workflow. When large shipping centers are used instead, they send directly from start to finish, without needing a stop in the middle. This makes it impossible for the same kind of spamming to confuse the network, slow it down, and even separate it. Let's talk about being your own money manager now. As your own money manager, you can more easily keep track of your own transaction history, as it only relates to you and not the entire network. This is how I was able to verify your payment is valid before either of us even contacted the outside world. You had your own money information and was able to prove to me that you signed it over to me, and the fingerprint trails allowed me to see that instantly, without using the network at all. I then simply used the network to finalize the receipt. This is why Bitcoin is called a digital cash system instead of a cryptocurrency in the original paper. Money can actually be handed directly from one party to another without an intermediary. Even if you tried to double spend the money at some point, the entire world would have the evidence of this instantly. It wouldn't invalidate your account, since someone could have held onto a transaction that you finally decided to reuse the same bitcoins before they later posted it. Since this is public information, these types of situations are not going to be useful to either party, as the reasoning for the old transaction not being finalized with nodes can be questioned and investigated. This situation, which could only affect parties which are completely off-grid, is essentially rendered unsustainable.
Let's review some analogies. For payments, we use serial number dollars instead of bitcoins. For networks, we use logistical shipping as a stand-in for internet traffic. The envelope represents a single transaction. A folder is a set of transactions at some level in a binary tree or a small full block. And a shipping container is a full large block. Full nodes are shipping centers, and Bitcoin wallets and SPV nodes are simply represented by ourselves walking around, since these are done with a small device or application. Secure hashes are represented with fingerprints and Merkle tree structures with nested folders.
Thank you for watching! Let us know your reasoning for why you think BTC or BSV or another fork should be considered the real Bitcoin.